Well, Floyd, I'm really happy to have the opportunity to speak with you a little bit about problems of racism in our community, and especially focusing on how we can, through educational excellence, help to overcome them. I remember one time in the past you came to my church to preach at the University of Toledo and did a marvelous job there and delivered a fine message that our people remembered. And so we have some history. I remember being on different rallies with you in the past and so on. So we have some history together along that line. I think that one of the impressive things is your own recent fast and your own religious experience connected with it, and many of the comments that you have made as a result, which to the effect that if you have offended anybody, you wish to reconcile with them, and to, as I understand it, sort of move to a new phase of cooperation and collaboration with members of the white community. And I think that some people, really are responding positively to that. And I wonder if you're getting any positive feedback like that.
I tell you, Jim, I am really excited about life and about this new mission. Grateful first for what God did for me, and grateful for the cooperation that I see among peoples now of every racial background and denominational background, and see people coming together to work on problems that are bigger than all of us. Let me just say that out of this fasting and praying over 18 days came an insight, and several insights, and one of those was my own relationship to the white community. And in the past, as most people know, I have been straightforward without any respect for the views of others. What that did, Jim, was help to further polarize the community. It also put me at odds with people who were just as sincere and just as interested in solving the problems of our community as I have been. And yet, I unintentionally cut them off. That was wrong, and I apologize for it. And I realize now how terribly wrong it was. I robbed myself of the opportunity to better understand and appreciate them, and of course robbed myself of the opportunity of them understanding and better appreciating me. Since that time, of course, we have begun to work very closely together, particularly through the efforts of Father Donnelly.
Yes, Father Marty Donnelly, who is pastor of St. Martin de Porres Church and does such a wonderful job in the inner city ministry, along with many others. Well, Floyd, I want to focus a little bit here on this educational side of the problem, because it's often seemed key to me. I'm, of course, been involved in the educational world as a campus minister at the University of Toledo, and sort of see the problem of racism from that side. I realize that's a tiny segment of it, but I might just reflect a little bit of what's going on at the university level, and then begin to expand that to an analysis of the general situation. Sure. But I mean, on our campuses, one of the problems is that we have are not increasing the number of black students attending college. In fact, we're not doing well at all with that. That seems to be one of our problems. The other thing, as shown by a number of studies around the country, is that a large number of minorities on our campuses sort of feel ostracized. I think there's 25% of them who report that at one time or another they have heard racial slurs or experienced some sort of harassment or even been assaulted. That's not the kind of thing we would associate with a campus, where civil discourse is supposed to be prevalent and help us to learn and grow together. And so we have a situation on our campuses where this racism still exists and where people feel that. And just to sort of round out that aspect of what I want to say about campus life is, on the part of the white community, what we're experiencing is a new kind of problem. That is a reaction to what they perceive as affirmative action. That is that black people and other minorities are getting special privilege in getting onto the campuses, special privileges in getting black centers put up, or having Afro-American studies in the curriculum and so on, and feeling a sort of reverse discrimination. That's a common thing now that we're hearing, and I believe psychologically it's behind some of the new kind of problems that we are facing on our campus today in terms of racial tensions.
Jim, if I may put that in some kind of historical perspective as well. Following the death of Dr. King, the devotees of civil rights and white liberals in this country espoused what we call the melting pot theory. That theory said in effect that we should ignore our differences, act as if we don't have any differences, and then come together in some big pot, socially, religiously, and economically, and somehow there'll be such a mix that nobody will know who's who, and then we'll all be happy. The problem with that is that the concept led to what Dick Gregory calls a coin matching game, in which whites said in effect to blacks, get like me. And so the more white we became, the more right we became. And the more white we became, the more acceptable we became to ourselves and to others. Unfortunately, integration was not really, did never really speak to the cultural aspect of all of our lives. So it gave me, the education that I received, gave me a white mind. And that white mind took on white values, made me appreciate what whites appreciated, made me want what whites wanted, made me want to go where whites went. But the education that I received, that was designed by whites for the benefit of whites, gave me a white mind. But when that white mind was housed in a black body, and it took me to white institutions and the white communities, then this black body was rejected, and it left me with a deep sense of inferiority. It left me with a deep sense of self-hatred. I accepted as legitimate the unspoken reason for my rejection, which was my blackness. Now, let's talk about the University of Toledo for just a moment. A great deal is said about the push for black studies. So, well, why should blacks have separate studies? That doesn't make sense. Whites don't have separate studies. Well, it's just like insisting that the contributions of African Americans be included in the curriculum. Well, they say, well, why should that be a separate thing? Why should that have to be included? Well, it is important that whites appreciate the fact that great contributions of literature, of economics, of mathematics, great inventions, great discoveries were done and made by African Americans, so that they can appreciate us beyond bouncing basketballs or kicking footballs or throwing baseballs or dancing and jumping and bumping. If people have mutual respect for each other, they will have mutual appreciation of each other. And what I see happening now in education by whites is a rejection of the inclusion of black contributions. And so what was recommended and is being recommended all over the country now, that special studies be set aside. If whites don't want to engage in these studies, then certainly African Americans ought to have the opportunity to do so. For instance, they are offering courses now in Russian because of the walls coming down now, and everybody wants to understand the Russians better. There are Chinese studies, Japanese studies. Africa is the largest continent in the world. Civilization was born there. And now, as African Americans better understand their relationship to Africa, they appreciate the culture. And they know now that our history didn't begin with slavery. We came through slavery to America. And I don't want to keep going on,
Yes,
but the point I'm trying to make is we need to know something about our past so that we can appreciate our present. And if we appreciate our present, then we can look forward to having a future. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. I appreciate the comments. Let me just take up another aspect of this, I think, that appears in the minds of the white community, relationship to blacks. I got this from one of my students who taught in a school in Harlem when I was teaching at Fordham, a white woman teaching in an all-black school in Harlem. And her sense was that among the black students, it was sort of uncool to be a good student. That if one really took studies seriously or tried to speak standard English properly, that one was becoming white. Now, since then, I have seen other articles. I mean, that was very striking to me because she said it's almost an insurmountable problem. In fact, she told me they hired black male teachers in this school, which would be thought to be a very good move because that would give a role model for the young blacks. And she said part of the reaction of the students she dealt with was those black teachers had become white, and they had sold out their black heritage, and therefore there was even a rejection of these black role models. Now, I have heard reports since that have suggested, in fact, there's one out recently, suggesting that the studies show that within the black community, that it is the peer understanding, the peers who set the tone within the educational environment, not the teachers and maybe not even the families, more so even than in the white community. Now, so it strikes me that when we're looking at educational excellence, that this is such a fundamental and deep question that it would have to be addressed if we're going to make any kind of progress. If we got students who think it's not cool to study or to do well in school, we've got a major problem.
Now, let me be clear about something. I do not subscribe to the view that we ought to allow African American students to speak broken English, to say this and that and you be and no. This world is a lot bigger than that. And secondly, we have to acknowledge that this is in fact a white man's country. I would like to believe that it belongs to all of us. The truth of the matter is it does not, at least at this point. Only in theory it does. As long as whites have the jobs, and we have to get them, we have to dress, and we have to talk, and we have to walk, and we have to behave in a way that is consistent with the wishes of those who have the employment. Now, if people don't like that, that's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. And I tell my children, if you want to talk that talk around here, that's one thing. But when you go out to meet the world that is beyond your community and you need a job and someone else has it, it's not about what you think and how you feel. It's about what he thinks and how he feels. And you have to, without sacrificing any principle of yours, you have to abide by what he thinks and how he feels if you need a job from him. Pure and simple.
Now, Floyd, what about, do you think this analysis that I was sharing with you that came anecdotally from a teacher, but then I've also seen studies, do you tend to agree with that? And if so, how would we try to overcome that? I mean, the essential point that black students would be influenced by peers, and that very often the peer pressure is that it is not really being with it to excel in school, to get good grades, and to move forward educationally.
Well, I'm not sure that's unique to our own community. I don't know what the peer pressure is like in the white community, but I do know that is a real serious problem. In fact, when I went to see the young man who was accused of killing two of my friends, he looked at me and he said, Reverend Rose, you don't understand. It's not what my parents think of me. It's not what you think of me. It's not what the teacher thinks of me. It's what my friends think of me. He was simply saying what you just said, that what is important to these young men, unfortunately, at this age is what their friends think. They will get in trouble if it raises their level of respect in the eyes of their friends without thinking about the long-term effect of it all. Now you ask, how can we change that? Well, the only way I think at this point that can be changed is we have to condition the condition. We learn by what we see, what we touch, what we taste, what we smell, or what we hear. There is no other way to learn. Well, if our children see violence all the time, if they hear violence all the time, if they touch violence all the time, taste or smell violence all the time, they're going to be influenced by that violence. And black youngsters look at more television than any other group in this country. And what's on television now? Violence, drugs, and crime. Violence, drugs, and sex. Sex, drugs, and violence, from the soap operas to the major movies. That's all there. They see it. They know, or at least they don't think, they can become the good cop, but they can become the drug dealer. They don't think they can become the good school teacher, but they know they can become the good prostitute. We've got to condition the condition if we're going to change this situation.
So it points up the tremendous complexity of the problem and the fact that the educational problems are rooted in larger societal problems. I think that's what people at the university level have always contended. They say, well, here we are trying to educate minorities as well as the dominant community, but we can't do it in isolation because they're a product of the school system, grade school, high school. They're a product of the neighborhoods and the culture in which they live. And so I think that is always good for us in the university world to remember. I mean, there's no way we can solve these problems just on our own, and I think you have well pointed that out. But it strikes me, there's a contrast. It's commonly thought today that Asian students do well, Asian minorities do well in the college level. I mean, that's a common saying among professors that Asiatic students work hard, do their things, and excel. They often do better than the white students do. Interesting thing in the report that I read said that teenage Asian students report that their friends think it's great to get good grades, to do well in school. In other words, they're getting a peer pressure from their friends to actually do well in school. And I think that I would guess in my own, and I think there's some psychologists who agree with this, that's one of the reasons the Asiatics are doing better in school.
That's the way.
Now, what we would have to try to do is to get this to be a cool thing in the black community to actually do well in school.
That's the way it was when I was in school. The kid who made the grades, we applauded. We made him president of the class. He was it, or she was it. They gained our respect and maintained it by involving themselves in educational excellence. All of that has changed, and I don't know the answer to it, but I do know one thing, that we've still got to say to youngsters, you've got to be good. It does not matter what your friends think or what they say. You've got to achieve educational excellence or you're going to be lost, period.
That is your way out. In other words, in one sense, it's a very pragmatic argument. I mean, it's one that says if you want to make it, the only way you can make it in this white-dominated world is to get an education, to have a degree.
People who know the most do the most, and people who do the most have the most. It's as simple as that. And you can walk that walk and talk that talk, but if you don't learn the basic principles of how this world operates, you're going to be out there and up a creek and no paddle.
I've talked before about what I think is a good contribution of the Catholic community to keep alive our inner city Catholic schools and to create an atmosphere where students are applauded for learning. I think our schools do well. Well, we know they do well. I mean, there's studies by James Coleman suggesting this. We produce good students out of these schools, often black students, but the climate is different. the atmosphere is different. And of course, the parents who sacrifice by spending extra dollars to send their kids to school have already reinforced the message. But it takes me back to a point, Floyd, that is it not important for us to help the black parents to understand the importance of education and to encourage them to reaffirm this with their students? I realize television is the bigger influence. I realize peer pressure is the bigger influence. But is it not true that the parents have to be helped, in a sense, to do this and to encourage their youngsters?
My parents instilled in me the value of education, even though my mother never went past the 8th grade and my dad never went past the 6th grade. But they knew the value that education would be to their children, as I know the value of education would be to my children. The difference in those parents of the Catholic schools, and I had a school for several years, and the parents of the public school children is a very simple one. They understand and appreciate discipline. They know that there is a relationship between how kids dress and how they behave. And so when they send their child to school, they expect him to behave in a certain way. They expect him to be disciplined by the school, and they know that if he does not behave in a certain way, and if he is unwilling to accept the discipline of the school, they know that it's coming out of their pockets, and they know that he has to come back home. Unfortunately, we have in the public school system now almost gotten away from the kind of discipline that brought us through, and we have said, well, look, if he doesn't want to go, if he doesn't want to study, send him down to the office. And he gets to the office and they say, well, send him home for 10 days. What's he learning at home? I went to a private school, 1 year to a public school, went to a private school most of my life, a small school, all black. I did not have to sit next to a white student to learn math, to learn English, to learn how to speak. But the teacher repeatedly instilled in me the values, and those values were reinforced at home, or they were first given to me at home and reinforced at the school. There were certain values. When children walk into a classroom, you're not just teaching them math, you're teaching students. That's a person. And the person that's sitting next to another person may not have come from the same socioeconomic background. And so he brings into that classroom certain feelings and certain perspectives and certain ideas that must be dealt with in addition to teaching him whatever subject matter is at hand.
Floyd, do you think that the Head Start program is helpful within the black community, and should that be something that we generally push for the administration to expend greater funding on and so on? I mean, I have myself a very positive sense of it, and I wondered how you feel about it.
I do. Let me tell you what the problem is. If you notice the Head Start program, the youngsters, and particularly young black boys who are in the Head Start program, they do as well as the kids in the suburbs at that age limit, at that age. But when the kids get to the 3rd grade, then they start slacking off. Something happens, and I'm not sure.
Even if they've been in the Head Start.
Even if they've been in Head Start.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know what we're going to do about that, but they start slacking off. Mm-hmm. So we can't say that the program is not valuable. It obviously is, and it holds these kids until they get around the 3rd grade, and then something starts happening.
So then what we've got to figure out is how to do the grade school experience better for them, to keep up whatever interest they've had in learning and whatever good start that they've had. So part of our problem, as we've seen here educationally, is we have to figure all the way along the line how we're going to make improvements in Head Start and grade school, high school, and at the university level as well. And give some sense that you can make it in this world. I like some of the programs the University of Toledo has where they try to go down as early as into the grade school period and acquaint them with the university and bring them over to the university, help them to see it, and help to encourage them along the way. it strikes me that is a helpful thing, that is not a foreign world, that somehow they know they could get there someday. And I believe that's, again, my own sense of great importance of having black role models. Like yourself, like people who have done reasonably well in the society. Again, I thought one of the good things we did in our Catholic system was we had this big celebration, a large dinner in which people, minorities who had come through the Catholic schools in the inner city were honored, and they had made it in the society in one way or another and were making their contributions. I saw the value as these are role models. The young people can look and say, yes, I could be like that. It seems to me to be very important. Floyd, you want to comment? Anything else about educational excellence? You just have under a minute to make some comment.
Okay, on the question of the role models, children become what they see. It is no accident that you'll see young black kids on the playground playing basketball till midnight. They see Michael Jordan.
That's right.
They see Isaiah Thomas.
That's right.
There's no accident that you'll see them playing football or baseball. They see successful role models in sports. They see successful role models in entertainment. What we have to show them is that they can see successful bankers, they can see successful businessmen, they can see successful teachers and successful doctors and lawyers. And not enough of these people are exposed to our youngsters.
And that's what they need. Well, Floyd, we've been talking here about the problems of racism and educational excellence. You've well pointed out the depth of the problems that we face, the complexity, and that we really must work together to try to overcome them. I'd like to think that our religious heritage helps us here, that we believe in a God who cares for us, who calls each one by name. Every one of those youngsters is called by name by the great God. And we can instill that sort of sense of value in them, then maybe they begin to value the educational opportunities as well.